Think we'll make a start, Mel. Welcome everyone, and welcome to the sixth. Have I got that right, Mel? Sixth, isn't it?
No, fifth.
Fifth.
I had to count in my head
webinar.
then.
The bold, the brave, and the beautiful. And we've got three guests tonight, and when I looked at the heading tonight, the bold, the brave, and the beautiful, I thought, oh, hopefully they're not all going to fight for who's the brave, who's the beautiful, who's the bold one tonight, but we can talk about that later. However, tonight's webinar is brought to you by EduShift, and I'd like to welcome Melissa Evans back. Hi, Mel.
Hi.
And myself.
I feel like I'm in trouble. You're calling me Melissa. Anyway,
oh, yeah, that's
we'll
right.
be right.
And and myself, Derek Bartels, if you don't know me, and it's great to see a whole lot of friends starting to attend, and we had about 65 registrations for this one. We've also, and some of those registrations are groups within a room. Welcome to the groups who are watching on a big screen. I'm pretty sure we've also got a number of final year graduates from University of Queensland education faculty. So welcome to you guys too, and thank you for being our future. First of all, acknowledgement of country, thinking about what country and Indigenous nation that you currently are located on. I know a number of people are travelling here. Some people are in their home area or home region, thinking about the nation you sit on and what does that mean to you? And if we can acknowledge the elders past and present, and those emerging as well, as we continue to acknowledge the beautiful nations across this country and the learning and stories that go with it. Okay, so tonight I'd like to welcome three people that many of you know already. And first of all, Tim Barrard. Tim Barrard's principal of Balmoral State High School in Brisbane. You may know Tim from a number of associations or a number of other schools, government schools across Queensland. Tim's at the forefront of contemporary education and contemporary schooling, and we are very lucky to have Tim with us tonight. Thanks, Tim.
Hi, everyone. I'll start with Yahweh. So Yahweh means hello in Yagara, which is very close to obviously the lands that I work on every day and also where I live. So for me, not only is the acknowledgement really important, but also the foregrounding of the work around how we support our students to find their voice and their agency when it comes to culture. I know.
And Tim, I'll jump in there. Sorry, I wasn't
right.
straight in there, and thank you for that. I'll come straight back to you, however. And Steph McConnell, Steph is known right around the world in terms of a leading change agent in terms of contemporary schooling in many schools, including Linfield Learning Village, and now the area principal New South Wales for EREA Flexi Schools. I've caught Steph in between her travels, about to run a national conference in the morning. Steph, we look forward to listening to you tonight, for discussing with you tonight, and thank you so much with your busy schedule for being with us tonight, Steph.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, sitting within a rainforest, I know where Andrew's sitting on his back deck at the moment, in the beautiful rainforest of the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. Andrew Kelly is principal of Living Faith Lutheran Primary School at Marumba Downs in Brisbane. He's been principal in other states, including the Barossa Valley. From the Barossa Valley to the rainforest of Sunshine Coast, how do you get those gigs? But anyway, so Andrew is a leader of contemporary schools, very much involved with either starting the contemporary transformation or continuing the transformation of schooling. And so, Andrew, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Now, Andrew's been traveling a bit, and he's got a little bit weaker than normal. So if his voice starts to go, let us know, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Derek and Mel. Wonderful to be with everyone tonight. I look forward to hearing our stories and contributing a little bit of the stories from my school and my previous schools as well. So thank you, Derek.
Thanks, guys. And we're talking about the bold, the brave, and the beautiful because we believe that you need to be beautiful in the way that you approach the whole culture of contemporary schooling. You need to be bold and courageous, which involves also being brave many times. When we talk about these people particularly, like a number of us, we're not happy in terms of what the traditional mode of schooling brings to enable our learners in today's world to thrive and flourish. What needs to change? How have they changed it? What do learning environments and learning culture look like these days? If these three were leading schools and are leading schools and sectors at the moment, what are some of the bumps, the hurdles? Let's learn from some of their experience today. And it's only a wonderful webinar if a number of you save up a few of those burning issues and questions to share with these guys. So don't forget to do that as you go. If you want to drop it into the chat screen, then you can do so. Anything else there, Mel, with the housekeeping?
Yeah, no, not too much. As Derek said, if you've got any questions throughout the night, pop them into the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat and we can use them to base our discussions, but we'll also have direct Q&A at the end. I'll also in a moment pop my details if you don't have them. If you have any tech issues and you have any worries, you can email or text me. I'll put my mobile in the chat as well. And I'll be on to that for you tonight too.
Thanks, Mel. Mel, do you mind bringing up that slide with some of the guiding questions? That's it. These were just some guiding questions for our notables tonight who they may be able to touch on some of these, where it started, the vision and the first steps of creating a contemporary school, maybe the why, what you did in terms of frameworks, strategies, or any innovations or anything that comes to mind. It's a bit hard in 6, 7, 8 minutes to be able to go through all this, but there might be something to focus on that would like to bring out and to share with you guys. The highs and lows, the lessons learnt, the challenges, the beauty, the breakthroughs, etc. So we'll touch on may touch on some of those tonight with our panel of 3. If we could jump over now to, firstly, Tim. Tim, could you kick us off? Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, everyone. Hi. Yeah, so it's a wonderful privilege to be here today, and I'll talk to you, I guess, about my journey really quickly. So I was an educational leader pretty early on from my career, and then had the, I guess, privilege of working in a city for a lot of it. So Corinda State High School, Indooroopilly State High School, really big, quite big schools as the system leader there. And then got to step up to be acting executive principal, had a bit of a taste of principalship by myself and went, okay, let's do it. Then had the wonderful fortune of going to Yeronga State High School. For me there, I guess it was leading transformation in a different way and leaning into the context of how the community wanted the school to feel and see the school in a different light, doing lots of consultation and a lot of, I guess, coming from an appreciative inquiry approach. With that school community, I was only there for 2.5 years, but led some significant transformational change with my middle leadership team in terms of a value proposition, which was really working through what was our promise to our students, our staff, and our community. At that time, we were just sort of getting over COVID and sort of all of the things with HR. And so really being quite forensic around what was unique about our school. Inner city in Brisbane, but we had a really beautiful appetite to really support and move both migrant and refugee students in a different way and support them differently with their education. Then from there, I've gone to Balmoral State High School. And so this was the time when the Minister of Education was Di Farmer. And so I was sort of, you know, FYI, can you please move over? And so from the work that I was doing, which is great, a really great, I guess, appreciation of the impact in leadership that I've had. And then I've had a stint at Belbo Park State Secondary College, which was really unique as well and different in the Ipswich corridor. So I now find myself back at Balmoral State High School permanently, which is lovely. Being, I guess, 3 schools across 3 years, I'm really happy to be settled now and to actually have a transformational impact in a different way. So Yeronga in the team there, really working with, I guess, companies like KPMG was one to mention, and having some high-level strategic advice from them in terms of consultants to really think a bit more about our, as I said before, value proposition, but also our promise to our community and how we could leverage those things that were quite different. So much so, I got a call on Saturday night from one of the heads of department, and the school has just won an award, Australian Education Award, for their foundation program, which was looking at refugee and migrant students. And so what was really unique about that aspect is we were positioning, there was this cultural competence that we have an understanding around, but then there's a other element of aspirations in the mix of culture. And so having, I guess, elders to share that experience, but also have mentorship in a really unique way outside of the 9 to 3, which is kind of what this groundbreaking work has been doing. And so that's lovely. And that was all funded from a family grant to be able to support that. I move on to Balmoral, and I guess what I'm really proud about is to come back is there was some media attention across the school that was quite negative, but it was an opportunity for us to, I guess, lean in, reset, and think about a really strong vision of values and how we could ground not only the work for our students, but also for staff, and rethinking about, I guess, how we can have impact. So much so, I guess I've come from the point of view now and saying to my staff, it's a 3-year commitment, it's a 3-year journey. We're just talking about engagement, and we're going to shift the meta language to our students to own their own learning. And we're going to do that in a really creative way to make sure they can have the power and impact and agency to actually do more and contribute more to the ecosystem that is around our community. So that's the sort of the big aha pieces of work that we're doing, and we're doing it in bite-sized chunks. So I've really been blessed to come back, work with my little leadership team on building capability. So much so, I'll have a leadership meeting once a week where I just do 15 minutes worth of instructional leadership, talking about, you know, the look forwards, what I'm thinking and what I would like to see have enacted in terms of our classrooms. And I use a continuum, which is like a consensus decision-making piece, where I really invite feedback. So much so, we come from a point of view of being a classroom practitioner in a classroom. We're controlling the class, then we go into leadership, and all of a sudden the classroom is actually, in fact, our peers or our staff and adults. Then in terms of a principalship, it's actually the ecosystem or the community of which it surrounds, and how you're looking at all those different types of levers to have impact. So for me, working, consulting with middle leaders and really thinking a bit more about how they have their voice, agency and say, how I can lean into those conversations, but also keep my finger on the pulse. What are the emerging issues? How do we have to pivot in a different direction because something hasn't landed? Great. Well, that's me to resharpen that and to make sense of it with my team to make sure the messaging is really quite clear around the purpose and intent. Some innovations I'm really proud about has been the engagement accelerator that I kind of touched on. Another one has been the work with New Metrics in Melbourne University, and that was really my first iteration to think differently and outside of the scope around how other jurisdictions are accrediting students, what I can learn from that. I'm in the state system in Queensland and you know, but at the same time, I can leverage new opportunities for my kids. So that's been some of my work that I'm really proud of, and how I can do that in different educational contexts. So from Yeronga, now transferring that to Balmoral State High School, and the energy that I can do and bring with that has afforded me great change in a really short space of time. I've been there for 12 months last year, and then I've come back this term. and already I feel like there's been significant change, so much so that behavior has decreased because we're talking about the right things with students. I guess a really quick thing for me is a milestone of my leadership has always been student voice and agency. I was doing this back as a teacher, classroom climate surveys and all of those types of things. Then I guess moved back into the notion of how can I position and give agency back to my students to give me impact. And so I meet with my student leadership team once a week. I canvass ideas, I ask and provocate with them, and then I ask them to circulate that feedback within the student community to give me feedback. So it's quite a unique way of doing it, but I get really authentic bits and pieces back. We are just launched a process where we're doing yarning assessments with our students and parents and also the greater community. And that's been really important. We've got a report around equity and inclusion. And what's come about that is leaning into the notion of having a uniform advisory committee, having those really fundamental channels for both parents, students to have their say, contribute, and to think differently around not just the space that we're learning in, but also how we're learning. Every minute counts in a lesson, how we're leveraging that impact and how we're showing that students can have their own learning shaped by the person who's facilitating the lesson, but they own if they're driving or if they're innovating or if they're just participating in the lesson. They own that and they can turn it up and turn it down depending on the socio and economic factors that they're presenting in each different lesson. How's that, Derek? I've probably gone over time.
No, that's perfect, Tim. And I was about to say, yes, Tim has shared a lot of that passion as well as some of the data and as well as where they're heading, and particularly focuses on agency whenever we visit there. And he's either talking to a group that we take there or to us. And it is, and the reason why Tim talks so much about it, because I think, Tim, we've talked about this before, is agency can sometimes be disguised as a whole lot of BS. Giving kids agency is not really giving kids agency in some places. What does it really look like, and how do kids actually build up that trust and commitment to giving kids their agency in terms of their learning? Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much. I'm sure people have got some questions to follow up in there and some detail. I'll hand it over to Steph. Steph's, as I said, one little stat I was just noting to myself before. I would probably say the previous school Steph was principal at probably had the most amount of visitors of any educational visitors, professionals of any school in Australia. I could probably say it quite safely because I know a few schools that have lots of visitors, and internationally as well. So sorry to raise the bar there, Steph, but over to you.
Great. Thanks, Derek. And thanks for being a frequent flyer at Linfield Learning Village. I think in terms of where it started for me, I think I was just thinking then as Tim was talking, but it probably goes back to when I was a student at school. I've never been happy. Never been happy with the system, never been happy with the imbalance of power, never been happy with the lack of voice that young people have in the school system. I wanted a voice at school. I started the student council at the school that I went to. And then I think that's kind of started me off on this trajectory that I have found myself on, right through to opening a new school, building a new school from scratch. So the dream, really, when you go into professional learning and they say, if you could open a school and had, from scratch, what would you build? So I had the enormous privilege of being able to do that at Linfield Learning Village. Public Education New South Wales at the time was looking for an innovative model, looking for people who were brave enough and bold enough to do things differently. So we worked really closely with an amazing group of people, including Professor Stephen Heppel and a couple of others from within the New South Wales Department of Education, and Fiona Young, who is one of our main architects and still works very closely with me on ideas that we might be looking at for the future. However, we developed a model for the school in consultation with the community, and this model is very deeply grounded in in research, but ultimately I think the vision for me and the vision of Linfield Learning Village, and also the vision in the schools that I'm working in now with EREA Flexi Schools, is to just do it better, to student voice, agency and autonomy, all the things I'm talking about, and I'm sure we're all aligned with, but doing it in the most authentic way. Tokenism, not interested. It has to be authentic. We don't give young people enough credit, even our youngest people. Linfield's a K-12 school, so kindergarten kids can do amazing things if you let them, if you stop doing it for them, if you address that power imbalance that we assume in schools, that adults know best and adults need to fix everything. Get over it. We don't need to do that. So the model that we developed then works. In my experience, it works with pretty much every kid. So I now work in a system that that we only deal with the most disenfranchised, disconnected, and young people in the system. They've been kicked out of every other school system, and this model works for them as well as it did for the students of Linfield who are in a very high SES section of North Sydney. So the model effectively has some key pillars, so stage not age learning, so all mixed age groupings. In fact, our primary school, in the end, we were looking at a K-2 and then a 3 to 6 model. Transdisciplinary, so we moved in the 6 years from the opening of Linfield right through to last year, started with multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary, and then we moved to transdisciplinary, and it's worth researching the difference between those things, because there are very significant differences in what that looks like when you're looking at looking at the decompartmentalization of learning that happens traditionally, particularly in secondary schools. All through K-12, so that means you're not separating your primary and secondaries. It's not you are in this particular year group, and so that's all you need to focus on. You can't, you hit that ceiling at the end of the year and you're not allowed to learn any further. There is no ceilings, wide walls, high ceilings, and low floors, so the access points are there for all students. We looked beyond the curriculum. It wasn't just about teaching the curriculum. That was just bread and butter. That's just what we do in schools, but we've got to do more than that. This is not preparing young people for the world that they're going out into today. We are all, I guess, stuck with a system that was developed over 100 years ago to produce factory workers. We don't need factory workers. We need young people who are innovative, creative, agile, flexible, all those words, we all know them. But that means we've got to really be bold and brave in the way that we enable that to happen for young people. We can't keep doing the same thing. So all through school, uses all the different expertise, knowledge, ages, older kids working with younger ones. In fact, I've seen the most incredible learning happen in a year 11 English class working with kindergarten on a project focused around King Lear. But it was incredible. And the year 11 kids actually learnt more than the kinder kids. I think they were quite freaked out by working with kindergarten students, but it was amazing. The beyond the curriculum stuff, we did a lot of work and still do in the flexi setting I'm in now, where we look at ways for young people to engage in skills, knowledge, mindset, attitude development that is relevant to the world that they're going out into. Challenging those power assumptions. As I said earlier, we have a lot of assumptions in schools about who holds the power. We've got to challenge those. We've got to move that shift towards young people having the power. Don't waste kids' time is my other big bugbear. Don't do dumb stuff in schools. Don't waste time on stupid things like assemblies and do you tell me a kid who loves an assembly? Honestly, I'm yet to meet one. It's all about the power imbalance. It's all about the power of the adults. And a lot of assumptions, and you might be sitting there going, what the hell is she talking about? I love a good assembly. And that's because it builds community. It teaches kids how to behave. I would like to challenge that assumption. We did a lot of things that, I guess, because relationships at the core, for me, relationship is always going to be central. When you do, and that's a really good way of judging what needs to happen in the school. I think if it's going to break relationship, don't do it. So we had first name basis, we still have a first name basis, no uniform. Young people had a lot of choice in the way that they learn. We used an online LMS to be able to do that, but the LMS directed them, and the way we designed the learning was to direct them to work collaboratively, to work outside, to work in different ways. Learning characteristics was another, and is a really big part of the model that I still advocate for today, and that is around teaching explicitly those skills, call them general capabilities, call them soft skills, but don't, all of those sorts of things, all that language. But that for us, it was empathy, self-awareness, resilience, collaboration, and creativity. And then we did, again, as Tim said, we also worked with Melbourne Metrics Project, and I'm doing it again now with my current schools in a slightly different way. But the idea being to build rubrics around each one of those. Each one of those characteristics had there's 3 sub-characteristics. So with resilience, it was I can work with I can stick with difficulty, for example. So each one of them is broken down into manageable sort of teaching moments, I suppose. In terms of what I learnt, the learnings, it's bloody hard work. It's a fight every day. You've got to be up for the fight, and it's worth it, because the most rewarding things that I have ever done, I have done in the schools that I have developed exactly that model that I've just described. Young people are empowered. They have a voice. They are excited. They are engaged. They can speak to adults. They go, I've had young people go to university from Linfield and come back and say, why don't these kids talk at uni? Like, we're the only ones who talk, the ones that have come from Linfield, because we taught them to think. We taught them not to sit still and be told what to do. So I think it's really significant in the way that we do that. We've also got to be kind to ourselves and to our staff, because you've got to bring staff along with you. This is really hard work. It is it's counterintuitive. It's really counter to the norm. And I always challenge people to challenge their own default. We as teachers, we have this natural default position that we go to, and it's usually around control, because when you're faced with a room full of young people, you want to be in control of that, and when you start to lose control, that's when you feel things unraveling. So we instantly go to, right, sit down, shut up, listen to me. We've got to challenge our assumptions about those sorts of things, but be kind, be playful, be curious. And I think that's probably my 7 minutes.
Thank you, Steph. Steph, that was said with a lot of passion. And if you haven't, and Steph just reminded me of watching Steph there, because I know that obviously Steph is very genuine about that, because some of those comments have stood the test of time. And if you haven't watched the movie New School 1, my simple question to everyone here tonight is, why haven't you? Because if you're here tonight and you haven't seen Most Likely to Succeed, we'll put the links up in the chat maybe. Most Likely to Succeed from 11 years ago, which is that 26 international award-winning documentary on education, which came to the States and all that. If you haven't seen Most Likely to Succeed, and if you haven't seen New School 1, my simple question to everyone here is, why have you not seen those? Because if you're on the journey of making schooling relevant, rich and relevant for today, to enable our kids to thrive and flourish, as our speakers have been talking about, please watch those movies. And Steph, Linfield Learning Village, Steph talks a lot about Linfield there. Well, there's lots of focus as one of the 3 main schools in that movie of New School 1. Thank you, Steph. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah, I'm currently the principal of Living Faith Lutheran Primary School. I'm going to share a bit about my previous school, Redeemer Lutheran School in the Barossa Valley. But just to touch on Living Faith, we currently have a vision to expand into secondary. So that's a story in the making. And that's a really exciting vision and opportunity, I think, for our school and our community to be not just a contemporary primary school, but a contemporary school from kindergarten all the way through to year 12. So that's a space that I'm working in at the moment. It's something I'm very passionate about seeing come to fruition, and we're in the final stages, I guess, of approval, and looking forward to seeing that unravel and getting our hands dirty and the soil turned in that particular project. My story, I guess, that I'd like to share tonight is a story of transformation of what was a really good school at Redeemer Lutheran School, where I started 10 years ago as principal there in the Barossa Valley. And the story probably does incorporate the community of the Barossa. If you haven't been to the Barossa Valley, do yourself a favour. It's a wonderful community of around 20,000 people. It's not a rapidly expanding community by any means, but there is a bit of a change of many younger people and families moving an hour north of Adelaide and embracing what a rural community that has a rich heritage of winemaking and food and restaurants at their fingertips. And so our story is one where when I turned up as principal of Redeemer, we had been an authorised international baccalaureate primary years program school for about 10 to 12 years. And we had a great vision in that space. It was still a really good vision, but it was probably becoming a little bit tired. And the school was doing really, really well. But I can kind of connect with what Stephanie was saying. We're probably, myself and some of the other staff were feeling like we needed a new season. And so I engaged an external consultant to give me and the school community a little bit of an outside view of what was actually happening in our school and some recommendations of what we needed to do into the future. And so I think that's always a good thing to get an external person's point of view of how you may be tracking as a school community or even how you're tracking as a leader in your space. And that person was Neville Gregan. I can remember really clearly two things. The first thing was he said, I'm only going to do this review if you don't have an end in mind. I need to be able to give you what I see and what I view as some recommendations for your school, because too often principals may or may not, or organisations may engage someone to do a review, but have an end in mind. And so he was really clear to me that was not going to be part of his project if he was going to do it. So that was really good. And secondly, when he did the review, he said, Andrew, you will need probably at least one glass of Barossa Shiraz to read my review and my recommendations and to really just to let them sit with you for a little while before you actually come to any conclusion, because they were going to be a little bit outside the box. And I really appreciated that. And what that review said was we needed to think about a couple of key things. And one was we really had cooperation of teaching staff, not authentic collaboration. And staff knew that, and they communicated that fairly honestly and trustingly with Neville in that review. Our curriculum was very good. We were doing pretty well as far as literacy and numeracy metrics go, but we needed to add two things: a bit more creativity, and students and staff were saying that, and also, we needed to add a bit more agency. Staff, students were feeling like they were probably going through the motions a little bit with curriculum offerings. So that was sort of the first step. You talked about first steps in our journey. That was the first step, was actually getting an outsider's point of view into what we were doing well, but more importantly, what were some recommendations for how we could do things even better. I'd been at the school for 2 years up to that point, and I felt from a leadership point of view, I'd worked really, and we do this as leaders every single day, we build culture and trust. And I felt like it was time really to build into that vision space, to build that second pillar of vision with our school community and involve all stakeholders in that. So what we did from there is we developed some design teams of staff, and as part of our own professional journey, we gave teachers agency, and we had a select group of things that we decided upon together that we would immerse ourselves and research and report back as a whole staff group on what some of those findings were. So I think there was about 10 different research groups all going on at the same time in in many different directions. Some of those were the three things that Neville had identified. The fourth, one of the recommendations I should have shared that Neville said is we really needed to consider a bit more of a stage rather than age approach to our curriculum. And we needed to be brave and bold and to consider what we ended up calling a multi-age pedagogy. And so there was one group in particular that researched that into significant detail. Now, just some context. Our school was the only school in a rural community of the Barossa Valley that wasn't multi-age. We had straight classes, and we had marketed really clearly to our families and to our prospective families that having an international baccalaureate curriculum was going to be really good for their children, and also having straight classes where students could learn at an age-based approach was going to be the key. So that multi-age recommendation in that report from Neville was pretty jarring, and something that was probably going against what our vision had been for the last 10 to 12 years as an IB school. So the boldness, I guess, came in questioning that, and also really understanding what a multi-age pedagogy could look like in our school setting. So that was probably the first step or so was probably the second step was the design teams we did as a staff. The third step was really investigating, changing our framework and really testing with staff whether we were going to embrace being a multi-age school and having a multi-age pedagogy, and really that allowing us to deeply collaborate as a teaching staff. And to do that, we decided that we were going to invest in a secret, and that's for teachers and staff of the school only council. And for the next term, we decided that we would really seriously consider changing the framework of our school. We've been immersed ourselves in other multi-age schools. We looked at stage, not age, based approaches across Australia. We sent teachers, non-teaching staff, we sent school council members to schools. We let them ask questions of people that were in the front line, teachers, what were their concerns, what were the benefits of multi-age. We really wanted teachers to have an authentic inquiry, I guess, into what that could mean for us as an IB school. From that, we really then went back and the school council gave me an ultimatum that we needed at least 70%, that's a Lutheran thing, 2/3 majority, of teachers to vote on whether we wanted to change our framework and become and have a multi-age pedagogy and framework for our school community. And we got somewhere in the 90s. I think it was about a 91% teacher voice into that change. And from there, we then went, I guess, into more of a stage 4, and that was developing a master plan to redesign all of our classroom spaces into what we call now a village learning philosophy. And that village learning, the concept of it takes a village to raise a child, was something that I think really spoke to us as a staff community, really spoke to our school council community. And I think it really had that underlining belief that every student should have a personalised approach to learning, that, the cookie cutter approach to curriculum, we were going to break that model in schools. And it enabled us, I guess, to really include a lot more student agency and student voice, teacher collaboration, and a lot more authenticity in our curriculum design and development across what the needs of each student was. So the master planning looked pretty busy and pretty serious. We had lots of subcommittees where teachers and staff were having voice into what these new spaces would look like. From there, we went really into that change management cycle with our key stakeholders, our parents and students. And the brave bit was probably sitting down with our families and having this major event where we, under the guise really of a new master plan and a new strategic plan for the school, where we shared that we were changing our framework and becoming a multi-age school. We were going to have this significant master plan. We were going to have new spaces designed to be spaces where every child can be successful in their learning. And just looking back on it now and talking to staff at the time, it was, we were sweating bullets. It was significant telling our families that we were going to go through a major change, and that everything that we had told you, not everything, but a lot of things that we'd told you in the past, we kind of had a new vision and a new belief about that. And I guess one of the successful things, we can talk about change management. I'm probably about to run out of my 7 minutes, Derek, but one of the key things with that change management plan was we ran that session. It was a repeat 2 or 3 times with our families and students, and of course we're in the Barossa Valley, so we had some wine and food to start with. That was important to welcome our community. But the most important thing was every staff member, other than the groundsman, got up and spoke about our village learning philosophy to our people. So our families, our parents, believed that this wasn't Andrew's vision. This wasn't the vision of the leadership team. This was every single staff member was invested in this, and it gave it so much currency. And because it was a significant change in the way we were doing things, I think it really was one of the small steps in that change management process, but a really important one to get, to get that momentum, that initial momentum you need to shift people. We rehearsed the living daylights out of that presentation, and we got feedback from key members of head office that came and listened to our presentation and gave us some constructive criticism on that presentation. So that first step, getting that first momentum, was really the key part of the change management process. Is that my 7 minutes, Mel and Derek?
That was beautiful, Andrew. And I was just trying to look this way to quickly see if I could sync some of those environmental photos. I'll put them up at the moment of that school. I have heard some people say to me, and people who have visited schools around the world, like some of us do in roles we've had or still have or whatever, I've heard 1 or 2 people say that the physical environment that Andrew's been talking about at his previous school at Redeemer was in the Barossa Valley, was one of the best primary environments that they've seen in the world. So it's a sorry, I'm rattling off all these lines tonight that I hear everyone raising the bar for everyone here, but no, that's actual fact, and it's worth to look at those, not just the culture and the pedagogy, but it was a beautiful environment to work through that. We're going to open it up to thank you so much, Andrew. We're going to open up the floor now. I know there's a whole lot of stuff that the 3 principals here tonight would love to tell you about. Andrew hasn't even gotten to his 2nd school, where he's the 3rd principal who is a contemporary transfer. Very fortunate to have a school where you have 3 principals who are on the same journey with the same passion. And I'm sure, looking at Tim and Steph and Mel here, that is very rare to have that happen. And it so happened that Andrew is very fortunate the 2 principals before him were very much on a similar journey, all came with their different flavors, but on the very similar journey that school needs to change. And what does contemporary schooling look like? Going to open up to the floor now, and I'll ask the question first while people warm up out there. I think, why is this not happening, being mainstream, a contemporary transformation of schools? Why is it not mainstream yet? We've been, at it for the last 10, 15 years at least, to really look at all those elements of contemporary schooling, a number which people mentioned here, let alone the student agency, the authenticity, connection to external community, all that sort of stuff. Why isn't it not mainstream? There is still a pocket that's happening, and some people's at different journeys, but there's still a large majority of schools out there which are happy to remain the same way that they've been for many decades or even many centuries. And therefore, why is that not the case? What is holding us back from this major shift? Steph?
It's hard. It's hard work. And I think I said that earlier. It's counterintuitive. It goes against the default position that we like to have as teachers. But I think ultimately, Derek, unfortunately, it comes down to the voices and the powers that control education. And the bigger the bureaucracy, the more the pressure, I suppose, to conform to the way we've always done it, despite the fact that that's quite evidently not what is best for our young people today. And I don't need to point people to the statistics that show the levels of disengagement, the lack of attendance in schools post-COVID, particularly the increase astronomically of childhood depression and anxiety. And if we are not taking seriously those things and thinking what we need to do as educators to change schools to also accommodate our neurodiverse young people as well, then we're on the wrong path. But unfortunately, there's a lot of politics, a lot of politics involved in this. And unfortunately, politicians are not the best educators. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And I think you all touched on it. It's the rich development of those contemporary skills and dispositions, which was brought out by everyone. That cannot happen in traditional school. We know it can't happen. It didn't really need to happen in the past, the industrial era, because we didn't require people to actually think the way that they need to think now. We just required people to be compliant. And schooling, sometimes traditional schooling is just called a compliance factory. Well, that can't be the case for the day if we adhere to our moral imperative as educators to enable these kids to thrive and flourish in today's world. Tim, any thoughts why this has taken a long time to happen?
Yeah.
You're probably the youngest here, Tim, so you'll probably see it mainstream.
Oh, look, we've all been through schooling. All of our parents have been through schooling, and so they have this preconceived notion about what passive and why it's important to be passive in the context of a lesson. For me, I guess, I never ask for permission to do anything. I just do it. If the team think it's right and we need to do it and it's right for our kids in the community, then let's just get on board and let's make it happen. So there's the boldness that you have to have as a leader of a contemporary school, where you are basically taking in a whole range of feedback progressively and always. And so while it's about understanding what your needs are of the community, but you're also challenging the status quo by also sitting there with your parents and saying, actually, I think we can do this better. I'm the first person to put out a survey to students and parents to find out feedback, to look at service, to look at things that we can be sharper with. But it's walking along side by side with all of those different types of groups and saying, we can do this better, but I need you at the decision-making table when it comes to informing me about what the next steps could look like. I've got some assumptions from all the research and all the things that I've done that could work in this setting, but I'm going to test them with you and to make sure that this is the right read. I like that idea that there's no end point when you get a consultant in to do some work with you and your team. It's about, it works better with me when it's authentic and when it's organic and when it's about us. It's about hope, right? So it's about, and this is for young people, especially with, trauma-informed practice and understanding a bit more about, that's our job as educators, to instill hope, aspiration, and a willingness to contribute more to our communities. That's the job that we have as educators. That's it. Yes, there's an old idea of subject master experts, and there's a point at which you have to have some knowledge and domain knowledge, but at the same time, your relational skills and how you're showing up every single day in that 70 minutes or that classroom matters most to every single student in that class. And so what can we do differently to contribute, to enable, and to make sure that we as educators are showing up for our kids? We're providing those conditions for that enable them to do better, but more importantly, we're giving them the feedback. And it's a two-way street. So I think that idea around consultation has never been more important now to drive and transform a new school environment.
Thanks, Tim. Well said. Mel, could I jump over to you? I think we've got some questions out there. Is that right?
Yeah, we do. And the first one's there's a couple of questions out of all of the amazing words of wisdom tonight. You've struck a chord, Steph, with cancelling assemblies. It's a hot topic. So I I'm laughing that there's been such amazing words of wisdom, but we've got questions. So
And
I'm
that's-
looking at
people
a back channel here, and Assembly's quite up
yeah.
there.
So people want to know a couple of things. So I've tried to put all the questions into a few things around assemblies. There's the question around any pushback from parents, government departments. Without the assemblies, you kind of touched on it, but maybe to bring it again, without the assemblies, how has community connection continued to be strengthened if that bringing together isn't happening, internally and externally? And did you do anything like a student-led assembly or anything like that as a difference? So
yeah, I think I understand why that's the thing that people focus on, because it's just one of those things that happens in schools and we expect it to happen. But my challenge, I suppose, is to unlearn what we think school is in order to reinvent it. I guess it is deliberately provocative to ask the question, how do you build community in a school? And if you think that assemblies is the way to do it, I would challenge you also to look again at your assembly experience and look at it through the lens of a student. Look at what's happening on stage. And yes, there might be young people up there. Yes, there might be students leading, performing, or whatever happens, but look at how long the rest of the assembly is able to maintain concentration in what's happening if they're not involved. How do you involve everybody in that? Does that actually build community, or is it just about compliant behaviour in a large school setting? Think about other ways that you can build community. Assemblies can be extremely challenging for neurodiverse young people as well. So coming back to the number of neurodiverse people we have in mainstream settings, we've got to be a bit more mindful and think about what the teachers are doing. Are the teachers standing at the end of each row, shushing kids all the way through it? Because if that's what's happening, it's another reason why it's not great. Is the principal or teachers in the school standing up to do announcements, give speeches? Why do they need to do that? Is that building community? It might be in your school. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just learnt behaviour. Maybe that's what we as teachers and students think is community, but it's not the true experience of community that I think we can achieve if we think differently about it. So yes, we do have different ways certainly at Linfield and in Flexi that we build community. So at Linfield, it would have been every term we had a mountaintop, we called it. So it would be a huge event. We would invite the whole community in. The parents would have food trucks outside and make all sorts of money out of that. But the students each had an opportunity to showcase their learning from the term. We would also have a festival of failure halfway through every term where we celebrated failure. We celebrated getting it wrong. We celebrated how much we learn when we get it wrong, and it also pushes young people to accept that's, it's an incredible resilience sort of development project as well to accept failure. So and yes, we had performances. We were really lucky at Linfield to have these amazing theatres, one that seated 1,000, one that seated 250, and one that had 100. But we also used outdoor spaces to showcase all sorts of different student achievement and work, but they owned that and they had their own setup. They created their own ways of showcasing their learning, but every student had the opportunity to do that, not just the 3, 4, 5 or the orchestra at the front on the stage. So yeah, I think there's a bigger picture there, and we've also got to challenge this concept that there's a rule or yes, we had to do a lot of work with parents initially on a lot of things, not just assemblies, but a lot of different ways of thinking. But I would tell you now that there are Linfield parents who would stand up here and say it's the best thing ever. There is no rule that says you have to have an assembly. So challenge anything that is not legally binding, I would say, because there's a lot of assumptions that we make in schools that this has to happen, and it's just not true.
Well said,
And
Steph. And while I've
Yeah.
while just to bounce off that, just like Steph answered that there was a moment a number of years ago, Steph answered about 7 questions or 10 questions in a row, and I recorded them sneakily and then told Steph later. And then they're perfect little 3-minute snippets. What do you do with parents? How do you handle those teachers who aren't on board and all that? So I've got those. If anyone wants to have a look at those sometime, just flick EduShift a message. Thank you, Mel.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say as well for everyone, not just for Steph, but on that challenge the rules, because if it's not legally binding, one of the questions had for all three of you, have you had any issues with your regulatory authority? So like, well, they're all different names, NASAB, VRQA, whatever it's called, in this contemporary transformation.
Andrew, can I pass over to you? You've been a bit quiet there.
Oh, I don't really have a lot to contribute to that question, but I just want to, I think one of the important points that Steph was making about assemblies was you said assemblies, Steph, but you then went on to talk about there's so many things that we do at school that are unnecessary for children and for their learning. And so I'd be challenging educators and leaders. It's more than just assemblies, that we do to our students, unfortunately, in schools sometimes that's really not conducive for learning, and it's not really a pleasant experience, and it's not actually growing them into lifelong learners that we want to flourish beyond the time that they finish with our school. So I just probably challenge it's more than just assemblies. As far as the regulatory authorities, I've been lucky enough to work in schools that have had fantastic governing councils that have really supported our vision for contemporary learning. I think that makes a big difference when you perhaps need to make sure that your accountability with some of those regulatory groups needs to be aligned, so to speak. But Tim and Steph might have a different story from being working for state education.
Tim.
Yeah, I've never shied away from influence. So I think it's always a wonderful highlight moment when you can showcase the impact that your work is having in your school community, and you can reference or invite others to share that experience as well. That's probably how I've been able to influence and sort of agenda different types of bits and pieces in the work, and also change perceptions around why contemporary learning is so valuable. You understand what types of influences you're leaning into, your mentors, and all of those types of things that you're considering a bit more around holistically where you want to shift and move the right direction. I said about feedback before, we have cut back assemblies and it's only 20 minutes, but it's all facilitated by our students. So my bit is a pitch, really. It's about a pitch for 2 minutes, and it's actually the students conducting it and running that piece. But we only do it 3 times a week. 3 times a term, and that's really consolidated because it's about house culture in terms of how we're sort of encapsulating that. But that's been a complete review for what it was before I got there. What else? There's, I guess for me, in terms of governance, yes, there's things that we have to maintain in terms of a corporate sense. But I do like to challenge the status quo by showing what else is possible and being bold and brave to go, actually, I don't agree with that, but I'm going to show you why, and I'm going to show you how I can do it differently. So come and I'll show you how it can work. So that's kind of has been some of the work that I've done.
Thank you so much, Tim. Steph, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely part of the challenge to, sorry, I lost my train of thought then.
Dealing with regulatory authorities.
I've never had an issue with NESA or anything in terms of regulatory authorities, but I think the key to it is you need to know the rules, you know the policies, and you know where the holes are in them. So you've got to know them back to front. And research-based for everything, there is, it's really important. It's the best way to convince parents and other educators that what you're doing is best practice when you have got research to back what you're doing. You don't just experiment with kids' lives. And I guess just the final point I would make on that is that everything that we did to focus and currently do to focus on wellbeing and relationships and young people at the centre. The end result is that every possible measure in terms of wellbeing, statistics and school climate, but also the things I don't care about, like NAPLAN and the HSC, every single one of those measures was off the charts with the way that we were operating.
Yes.
So I think when you have good practice in place, when you've got students at the centre, all of those other things that are valuable to some people, high stakes testing, all that other stuff, it all fits into place. But if you prioritise those things and focus on those things, it never works. So students first, relationships at the centre.
And find someone who's going to bring hundreds of people to your school at a time to shout your praises and to learn, and those knockers will go, wow, look at that. Must be something good happening there. That's always a good strategy as well that we leverage a lot, because if we believe in it, then showcase it. And I think all of you agree that, you know, you showcase what you do very well because you're passionate leaders. Mel.
Well, we're pretty much out of time.
Yes.
So I had one more. If we can maybe wrap it in 30 seconds each,
Okay.
which I know is really hard, but just to try and keep with time. So the last question that I have that I think was a thread was, if you could do one thing tomorrow, if you were starting this journey
Beautiful.
tomorrow and you had just one thing to start, what would you do?
Look, I would start with appreciative inquiry. Really, you know, right? If you're going to prune something, you're going to take it back. Think about what's working, what's great, and what people appreciate about your school, your ecosystem, and your community. Start there, and then expand about what else is possible. So that would be how I would approach it.
If I was starting from scratch again, I would do it tomorrow. I am consulting with a group of people on an idea for doing this again and locating schools in universities and accessing all of joy that brings. But I would do the same model as I have described to you tonight, because I know that works. If I was adjusting a traditional school system, that's always harder, but I've done that too. You've got to start with the belief, you've got to start with the vision, and you start with the coalition of the willing, and be brave.
Thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, I think probably similar lines to Steph, in that you've got to make sure that you've got a shared vision and you've got people on the journey, and really understanding what that vision for your school and what your contemporary vision is. And that coalition of the willing is really important in that whole change piece too, because we know that not everyone's going to have a real belief in that shared vision, and that's okay. But you've got a journey and you've got to get momentum, and you need people with you and on the bus. So,
Can I just throw one in there, Mel?
Sure.
I get a piece of A1 or A2 paper in around the groups and get people to paint the type of person or individual they want to actually leave that school eventually, the profile of that graduate, and use that as the starting point of every discussion that's had then.
you're good.
I like that one, Derek. And it reminds me, I think every leader here tonight has spoken around the power of the consultant, of someone walking with you. And for me, when I was principal, Derek was my consultant walking with me. So, and I remembered that one exercise and how transformative that was for every decision that we made from then on as a school. Like, I brought it back every time as a principal to, how does that achieve our learner profile? How is that doing that? So that was a good one, Derek. Well done.
Well, thank you all. Can I first of all, if we can give a silent round of applause, because we can't hear everyone there, for the guys on the screen, and also all you guys that asked some great questions. And also there was a couple of other channels here that I was going, wow, look at that. So it's a great buzz. Thank you to those who are in groups at the moment. Thank you to our new leaders who are final year graduates, undergraduates at University of Queensland. May you lead well into the future, and hopefully we've given you some pearls of wisdom which you might take and create your own pearls to actually transform schooling across the world so that kids can thrive and flourish. Thank you all for attending tonight. Remember that EduShift can walk with you too as consultants, or if you need anything from tonight or need any frameworks, etc., just give us a yell. Thank you all. Thank you guys for joining tonight, and looking forward to the next webinar. Bye for now. You guys might want to stay on the screen.